Hello, my name's Ajay and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Today it's a pleasure for us to welcome Dr. Carl Shapley. Dr. Shapley is a Doctor of Philosophy in Ontology and a Doctor of Education. He was born in 1927 in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on the campus of Harvard University. In 1962, he became the founder of the New World Education Foundation, of which he's still the Chancellor today. And he's also a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Dr. Shapley, thank you so much for joining us on The Defining Moment.
Well, it's splendid to be here. Appreciate it, yes.
Well, today's topic is about the interface of science and consciousness. And obviously, as a Doctor of Philosophy in Ontology, that's a subject you're more than qualified to talk about. However, before you do, can you please share with us a defining moment from your life?
Well, there have been so many. And so I suppose I should start with what I found out about life and death, which is pretty defining, at the age of 3. And I didn't realize I was any different from anybody else, but I just took a look around and said, it's not going to work. I don't think this is going to do it. As I jokingly say, the travel brochure didn't tell me it was going to be like this, planet Earth and, all this stuff. And so I intuitively, as a 3-year-old child, induced myself to stop breathing, the way swamis do and things like that. I just stopped breathing and went into the death throes. And as far as I was concerned, I have no idea why I did it beyond the fact that I just didn't like what was around me, and that was it. They got me back into body again. I was recorded as dead, but they got me back into body by using steam or whatever it was. I think I'm told it was all about getting the breathing back. I don't have any visions of having been on the tunnel the way people talk about it. Nothing, no memories of it, no memories. Maybe it was happening, but I didn't know. But what I do realize, and I realized it very quickly, that I came back as a different person, a different aspect of the oversoul, to use Emerson's term, the oversoul. A different part of that came back into this little body. And it was the most astonishing thing to me that everybody else wasn't doing the same thing. And I came back as a music person, without the dexterity, but as a mentally and heart music person. Classical Western music has been a big thing ever since the age of 3 for me.
So at the age of 3,
yeah,
you had a near-death experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's recorded by others. It's not just me, saying so.
It was a medical, it was, I guess, considered a medical
Absolutely.
condition.
Well, Harvard University, they had all these things available to them, and they just made sure that they got me back into body before the brain death set in, whatever it is. I'm talking now as an older person.
Right, yeah.
Then none of this was anymore. Doesn't everybody do this? Hello?
And apart from this ability and interest in music, how did it affect the rest of your life, having had that experience at the age of 3?
I have to say the answer in 2 ways. First of all, it masked off everything that I'd known or been before age 3. It focused me entirely on music and cultural things, and later on even education and doctorals and things. But when I became an ontologist, basically through the Christian Science movement in the 40s, 1940s, what am I, 17, 15, 16, 17, it made a lot of sense to me that I'd been in a soul experience from age 1, and some of the echoes came back from what I'd been really full of when I was a child. And I must parenthetically say, today I know that I can reach children, and even very small children, they haven't forgotten where they came from. Because I spent a whole career with hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of students and their families, and I was always successful in getting to understand them as souls and not as personalities, as souls, and not even as bodies. So I'm sure that early experience of mine influenced that enormously.
And let's actually look at this whole subject of ontology. What is actually ontology?
Well, is a kind of a joke. I use the term more than anybody else does because people don't know what it is. So they have to ask, as you did. And the joke is that they usually think I mean oncology, which means bloody things happening in hospitals with cancer and stuff like that. So it becomes a big joke. But ontology, Greek for the word soul, onto. So you have cosmology and ontology. I somehow got born into a family of cosmologists with astronomy and things like that, and I'm an ontologist, which is the interior experience, which is the reality of the interior experience. And so nowadays it's easier to call it consciousness than it is to call it soul. Why? Because the religions have taken that word soul and made it their own property. No, it's not the religion's souls we're talking about. It's the basic ontological reality, the awareness of who we are, why we're here, what it's all about, and it goes much, much deeper into the area which Carl Jung would have been very much involved with, and Roberto Assagioli and others who deal in the soul, in the life of the soul. And that, of course, became my career for me. But meanwhile, you do something, don't you, in society? Well, I did education.
Well, Dr. Shapley, this whole issue of ontology, the questions of who are we and why we have, those are questions that have been with us for a long time and continue to be the source of exploration. Mm-hmm. Now, what is the relationship between science and consciousness?
It's only we in our rational minds rather recently that we've separated these things out. We should get back to a unity which used to be there before. Wisdom is not skio, which is knowledge, and it also comes to the point where knowledge is not sufficient, which unfortunately our rationalist sciences have tended to say. And so it needs to be the consequence of bringing these things together. Now, Sophia, if you want to go into the languages, is your wisdom space. And so if the soul is being educated, it's being brought into the wisdom space, not just into knowledge. It's more fundamental than the education that we give today, much more fundamental. Why am I here? What am I doing? Who are you? Who am I?
Yes, and traditionally, I mean, just this connection between consciousness and science. I mean, traditionally we have pursued answers to those questions either through religion, and now obviously in the last few centuries
years.
Through science,
and
but very much through science now.
I want to be kinder to the scientists and say, look, that division is an artificial one, but it's one which has been professionally very distinct. But Newton was considered to be an astrologer. Hello? Try that one for size, especially since Newtonian physics now is what's being replaced by quantum, largely. And, down through the ages, who sat around Socrates? I mean, who was with Pythagoras? These were all students of higher wisdom, basically. And so I like to think that if I'm any use to anybody, that I'm closer to the Gnosticism of the 1st century A.D. than I am to what's happened since. And that even the teachings of the prophets in the West and Jesus and others, and he has certainly had connections to the India wisdom because it's all one. These things now can be brought forward today, and it's the most exciting time we've ever had. And one of the best things about this is that we've lost our fixed view of science as being, something which you've got to prove rationally, and you have to be able to touch it, see it, hear it. Hey, these systems that we have of hearing and seeing are not sufficient to go beyond the spectrum, a very narrow spectrum. And reality has a much wider spectrum which can't be picked up by the 5 senses. Cannot be. So maybe I'm a little bit close to Dan Brown when he writes about things, not only the Da Vinci Code, but the way the sciences have restricted our vision of what's going on. We put somebody on the moon, man on the moon, using only Newtonian physics. we did not use any quantum to get a man on the moon. So maybe that was the last monument of using physics in that technological way. And I must say, in my own history, in the 1930s at Harvard University, I would bother professors. I would go in my tricycle. I've been recorded as going into the library until I found somebody I thought I could groove with, and groove with them. But the physics, nuclear physics, atomic physics, wasn't a subject that anybody was studying, even in the 1930s. Somebody in a desk in the back room of the laboratory, not very well honored and probably not even paid well, would be the only atomic physicist in the 1930s. And now technology rules, and it's wonderful. I'm not putting it down, but it rules. And the atomic physics has gone into the military space. That I decry. And I, of course, personally knew Albert Einstein, so therefore I know that he came more from the heart than from the head. People don't talk about that much. My picture is in his biography because, I was a kid that took an interest. Every time he visited us at Harvard there, he stayed with us. And he came from the heart. And he died of a broken heart of what had been done to bomb a civilian target, Hiroshima, with the information that came from his research and his wisdom had been used that way. And so, what can I say? But the thing is that science has a broader view today, thank goodness, than it had during that period. So if you have E equals mc squared, and I was naughty because we were friends, I've taken his formula and redone it. E equals L, capital C, small c squared. So E equals L, that is God is love. E is energy, which is God, God is love. E equals L, but in the continuum of consciousness, because it can only be manifested in that continuum. So E equals LC. And we need a better constant than c squared. I'm sorry. And the Maxwell's work almost got there, but not quite. And Max Planck his constant doesn't work there. You need a better constant. And the reason c squared doesn't work is because, you can go faster than the speed of light, and then you get dark holes. And that's where the creation takes place, in so-called dark holes in the universe. And so the creation is there. It's only dark because it's gone faster than the speed of light. If it goes faster than the speed of light, the light that's behind it doesn't work. And so there's a bit of joking going on here in this interview, because this is not a scientific interview. But on the other hand, if you take consciousness into the Einstein formula about E equals mc squared, then you go beyond the material universe, and beyond the material universe, as David Bohm and others would be very clear with the implicate order and all to show us, is a matter of having other parallel experiences going on. And time isn't there, so you can say at the same time. Space isn't there, so you can say at the same space.
You mentioned Einstein, and of course Einstein is the great scientist of our time. That
one of them, but the one that's best known to people. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, often we associate scientists as being atheists, but that, as you've just said, was not often the case. In fact, I think Einstein, he actually, towards the end of his life at least, proclaimed his belief in God. Now,
early, not just at the end.
Oh, so he was.
Oh yes, when he was in Switzerland, yes, and the discussions, but religion not in the sense that you got to join a group.
Okay, but the question I'd like to ask you...
church.
Okay, the question I have for you, though, is now, as someone who's pursued a path through ontology and had your insight into science and into consciousness, what would you say is the nature of God?
Oh, very easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you take them as units, 1, 2 becomes dualism, 3 becomes, I guess, trialism or something, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you take the 1 and divide it, you get 2. And divide it and get 3. you still have the one. And so, fundamentally in the universe can be divided into many aspects of consciousness, I would say, but it still remains one. It still remains one. The religions that came from Abraham all talk about the oneness of God. And I've just proved that you can have oneness and divisions within it, okay? But in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth and the etc. without form. Genesis 1:1. The motive force there is Elohim. And Elohim is a plural noun. So in the beginning, the gods, plural, created the universe. Well, I'll take that home and work on it. I'm not going to say anything more much than... So therefore, that being the case, the gods, the creative force, Uncle Albert's E equals mc squared. Uncle Albert's E is energy. So I can say God is energy. God is source. God is ultimate source. God is energy. But when we talk about the creations that come out from that, then we have to be dealing in multiplicity and infinite diversity.
So explain that a bit more, like this whole concept of quantum physics, or you even mentioned parallel universes. Are you saying that there is a God of many worlds, or there are gods of multiple worlds?
Yeah, I have to say both. I have to say that there is a fundamental creative principle, but that the creation then is, I don't want to say it's done by, but it is manifested through many, many diverse ways of creating. I mean, there's even the creation of sex, after all. Is that God? Well, a funny thing about it is actually. But as far as what makes the product, it's not. That's not God that makes the product. And so that's the Elohim. That is the functions of the creative. We sometimes use the word co-creation. I like that. I think it's good, because it recognizes you and I, yes, we are God, but we're not God and that's the whole story. It's just that we are coming from that source, we're connected to that source, we are never disconnected from source, and so all the parallel universes go back to source. They're not disconnected, but they are distinct and individual creations, yes?
And are you and I in a parallel universe?
Absolutely. Part of us is here and part of us is not here. It's really wonderful. It's heaps of fun. That brings out the child in me, because I wasn't a child when I was 3, thank you. I have not been a child until I'm 80, but nonetheless, go for it. The child in me says, yeah, we're all here creating together, having a wonderful time. We're in parallel universes. Part of us is here, part of us isn't here at all. Different things. And I'd rather have experts talk about this. This is why I'm doing it with a smile on my face.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, science has come on leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Now, in the relationship between, or the interface as today's topic is, between science and consciousness, have there been tipping points in history where they've actually been able to move forward together?
Together. I didn't know you were going to say together. Move together. Well, they never knew themselves as being anything different. And so the togetherness was a given. Your elders, shall we say, as one now, the elders were respected. Sometimes they were respected as priests, which meant that they were in between you and God. That wasn't very useful. And Akhenaten in the 18th dynasty in Egypt began to get rid of the priests, and of course they got rid of him ultimately, but you don't need a priest to get between you and God. You don't need a bunch of saints. You don't need all these things. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, but you don't need that. They are actually obfuscating the fact that you and God never left each other. And so this whole thrown out of Eden, all these things are myths which have elements of wisdom in them, especially the humility part. But on the other hand, they are myths. You cannot say that you cannot intuit that you've ever been separate from God.
If we've never been separate from God, then why are we in a world where obviously there is a conflict between God's ideals, or the ideals as we would like to perceive them, of goodness, of respect.
Are we? Are we? You've put out your belief system that we are separate, and now you're asking me.
No,
the
question would be: are we in a world where there is good and evil?
The world of duality, the so-called world of matter, is at best one of the parallel universes, and we're basically having a good time. You know, we chose to be here. That's being pretty well proven by people that don't need to invoke me about. That we chose our parents, we chose to come. There was some kind of a summit conference and said, how about that one? Down you go, or up you go. But that, I'm carefully being a little bit fey about saying this at this point. There is a great deal of serious research and serious work on identity and on intentionality and on parallel universes and those things. And there's been laboratory science put to it. But at the end of the day, you have to expand from the rational to include the mystical, and they both have a part to play in intuiting reality. And intuiting reality is what I say about parallel universes, which is where the ontologist and the cosmologist speak different language, but hail the gods, they're saying the same thing in different languages.
I'd like to move on and ask you, I mean, obviously in your discovery and understanding of these things, you were inspired by certain scientific figures, I mean, just from what you just shared. However, what religious figures inspired you also on that journey?
Well, the beginning for me was Mary Baker Eddy, because the science of Christianity, you have to redefine science, and you have to redefine Christ. Science, not the science of everybody's that we've just been talking about, but more of a metaphysical science, a metaphysical Gnostic science. That's where she was at. And the science, and this 19th century lady who was gone beyond anything of that time, amazing. But that Christ, I'm sorry, I don't consider it Christianity, because Christianity, like the other religions, is guilty of the Crusades, is guilty of the burning witches at the stake and all that sort of thing. And so Christianity as a religion, I'm sorry, I will not go there. But that doesn't mean that Christ is there. It frankly doesn't even mean that Jesus is there. But that's really going to open up a whole lot of emails coming into you, so I'll leave that one alone. But really, I think he would, as a historical person, would be just as appalled and amazed as I am, or you might be, of what's happened to what was supposed to be his teachings. So I'm very interested in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. I'm very interested in what happened there. And there's lots of good research going on. The Nag Hammadi scrolls that have been dug up have been very insightful. There have been Gospels of Philip and Gospels of Thomas, and not just the ones that are found in so-called the Bible. And there's quite a lot of evidence that the Master Jesus did, in fact, before he was 30, travel as far as India, or at least where India people he came in contact with in those 28 years that are unrecorded of what he did. And so my sense of it is that he had time to be with his Essene family, which are basically ancient metaphysicians in a way. Well, I don't have time to go into it in depth, but I'm not just speaking off the top of my tongue. There's research behind that. The first 7 years in Egypt wasn't because Herod was killing the kids. He went there just to understand, to be reawakened, the ancient teachings of the Pharaonic times, Atlantean times, whatever all that is that produced.
Is this all part of Christian Science?
Not at all. None of what I'm saying here is a part of Christian Science.
Because you mentioned there was
Christian Science. You asked me what had been the first thing to move me there.
Yes.
Then the science and the Christianity, and for her, Christianity was a beautiful thing. I'm just saying, I'm sorry, with crusades and witch hunting, I can't agree with that. But to her, it was a beautiful thing, and her version of it was a beautiful thing. And her version of science, again, was 1860s in the 1870s, and you didn't have, the technology or the quantum of today then, but she intuited these things, so she was a great mentor for me, and I appreciate that. In my early years, it's only much later when I say, thank you for the foundation, I'm going to build on it. Not as an ego, I'm just going to build on it conceptually. And at that point, then you realize that we had Alice Bailey, and with the Theosophists, you had Blavatsky and these others who had done lots of good work and along those lines and brought in masters from other dimensions. They haven't gone anywhere; they just aren't here in body. And so you got DK, Khatumi, and all these, and Master Saint Germain began to speak to me. So that's how I came closer to the world of the esoteric side than I had been before. And Christ, after all, is a Greek term, and it's a Jewish Messiah that's going to come. So it's both Greek and Jewish, and then it became, of course, Christian. And then later on, dear blessed Muhammad brought him in as one of their prophets. And so there should be a unity to all of this rather than the fighting and the diversity. So I've said enough. I'm getting a little bit polemic.
Well, Dr. Shapley, you mentioned you were interested in those first 2 centuries AD, and of course religions, as of course the world itself, goes through ages. How would you describe the age we are living in now?
I think that we are reinventing ourselves, and thank God for it, beyond the point where religions had to be set things. And so maybe we have to say we go back to the Atlantean times, or to the Lemurian times, or to the times when the Vedas were put together in India. And so the early things, which reached a kind of climax in the year 1, what's now for us 1, but did not succeed in getting all the duality, all the fighting, all the misunderstanding out of the way. So we are now at the point where we can reinvent ourselves, and it's the most exciting time we could ever imagine. But we do have to be honest. We have to be also loving, we have to be careful, and we have to be, allowing mistakes so that we can improve upon them instead of condemning them. Recognize that these things in society and the kids that are coming along now don't need to carry any of the baggage that we brought with us. Hopefully some of the chocolate and the goodies, but not the baggage.
And are you expecting dramatic changes?
Oh, absolutely. I'm seeing them already. And my work right now happens to be in something which is so into non-disclosure that I can't talk about it. But on the other hand, we're doing all we can to get those who have access to wisdom without ego, but access to wisdom to bring out the best that we have always known was there at this time. And we have half of the world's population under 21. So therefore, if you want to call it kids, under 21, half the world is kids. And they don't need this baggage. And they don't need to be told that we know it all. The legacy that we've been given to them is flawed. It's so seriously flawed in terms of society and government and these sorts of things that they go into drugs and that stuff. And, this is now an opportunity to raise up the consciousness. And I would say that anybody who has any programs they want to do, they're not going to work unless they change the consciousness. And if they change the consciousness, the ontologist here and those who are in touch with ageless wisdom, not ancient wisdom, but ageless wisdom, are available. And I tell you, it's just awesome what we can be doing now.
Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time. Dr. Shapley, thank you so much.
Don't be afraid, but we have run out of time.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
God bless. Yes, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you very much.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. If you'd like to find out more, we're on the web at www.definingmoment.eu. Thank you for watching, and we wish you all the best.